Welcome to Grounded Engagement, Liberating Leadership. I'm Kristina Katayama, and today I'm in conversation with Dr. Rick Hefner, someone who spent 45 years at the intersection of process improvement, leadership development, and what it actually takes to build an organization that learns. Over 200 publications, work across academia, government, and industry, and right now, Senior Director at Caltech Center for Technology and Management Education. Rick, I'm really glad you're here.
Thank you, Kristina. I'm happy to be here as well.
Great. I wanted to start somewhere that I think gets underneath all of that. You've spent a career in environments where the pressure is always to fix things, to find the gap, to close it, and move on. But the leaders I find most interesting are the ones who've learned that fixing and developing aren't the same thing. When did that distinction start to matter to you?
Boy, I think it's occurred kind of throughout my career. And I think it depends. When you take over organizations that maybe are already broke, you learn about fixing very quickly. I've been in many situations where I actually had to develop organizations and I had a chance to more influence the direct aspects of it. And I think a lot of my thinking on the subject probably came from, my experience as a systems engineer. I grew up as a technical person, served in technical roles. My first leadership roles were technical. And then, as I progressed in my career, I got a chance to manage large organizations. And learned that some of the things I knew about system thinking, structuring programs, et cetera, could apply and could be used to set things up well. Of course, for me here at Caltech and the Center for Technology and Management Education, we offer professional training in my current role. And we really learned this during the time of COVID. It was a lot about accepting a new reality and not fixing the problem of classes affected by COVID, but really thinking about what kind of a new organization we need to be in the post-COVID era.
Yeah, can you say a little bit more about that, right? Because during that moment, you completely pivoted initiative real time. That kind of decision takes specific trust in yourself. Where did that come from?
So I think it's confidence that, in a time like that, in a time of crisis, in a time of uncertainty, it's important to set a clear direction and move and maybe almost be in an experimentation mode. We knew we had to do things differently. When COVID hit, the center was completely in classroom training. And we went on site to customers and we did training on campus, et cetera. And of course, we couldn't do any of that at the start of COVID, but we still had to maintain the center. We knew it was also an opportunity, right? With people stuck at home, this was a great time for them to be able to get some of the training that maybe their normal work schedules wouldn't allow. And so it was about setting a vision for my staff and explaining we're in a different environment. We're going to need to do this differently. We need to convert a lot of classes very quickly to on-demand, to Zoom. We need to learn about this. And I tried to approach it as an experiment, right? We're going to prototype some things kind of from my engineering background, right? And so we're going to revise this class and we're going to try it and we're going to use these procedures and we're going to see how that works. And if it doesn't work, we're not going to try to fix blame on anybody. We're just going to say, okay, parts of that worked well, parts of that didn't. And here's what we learned from that prototype. Let's make the next prototype stronger, better. And I think it was communicating that to the staff to make sure that they felt emotionally safe to go ahead and try things, to experiment, to throw out ideas, to establish a collaborative environment where everybody could contribute to how we might work in this new environment, and to also accept that we were in a new environment and we couldn't keep doing business the way we had before.
So what did it take to make that shift, to be willing to make experiments that we'll learn from, right? Some things are going to work and some things are not. And maybe something that worked yesterday doesn't work today, right? Because it was very much a changing environment. Can you give me an example? Like, the thing that you just named there is so fundamental and important. It's critical. How did you make that shift, right? In the staff to be able to see it differently and relate to it differently.
I think the value of working in a team or an organization is you've got lots of different perspectives and lots of people will do things. So I think we first established the realities of where we were and the fact that we would need to change. And that was really about communication. And then to communicate to the staff, I don't have all the answers. I haven't worked in a Zoom environment before. I don't really know. And lots could go wrong. And I need everybody's active participation to help spot problems. And so we tended to take it kind of as let's get together and think about the risks. What are the risks associated with doing a Zoom class? What is it we need to know? What could go wrong? How might that be perceived by our students and their role as customers and clients here? And then just encourage everybody. We're in this experimentation road. You've got to make a safe environment for people to contribute ideas. And especially in that time, we had to create an open environment where people could identify risks they see. I think a lot of people don't identify risks in a plan going forward because either the fact that they bring up the risk may, they're afraid they might be perceived as negative or not a team player, or by saying I see something you're asking me to do as risky might somehow imply I'm incompetent in doing that. The fear is the leader will say, well, if you can't do it, we'll get somebody else who can, right? So I made it clear that our goal was to preserve the organization, to continue doing it, to continue the excellence that we had provided. And I needed their help in crafting ideas on how to do that and identifying where those risks are that this might not work. It was an extension of the culture that we already had, but it was just extra encouragement for the staff that it's okay to say, I see a problem here. And we're going to take that as a problem with the system, not, something attributed to an individual. If an instructor came on board and didn't do well, we didn't take it as, that instructor didn't step up. It was, okay, how could we have identified that problem early on and trained the instructor better? What guidance could we have given? How could we have safety-proofed the system? And so it's that it's about the system, it's about the system's performance, it's not about individuals. That perspective we tried to put to everything we did.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense, right? Because it would, I hear the fundamental shift there from the problem being in the system rather the problem being a person, and that you needed the people to help identify that. So it's like, I can see that. That's great. Thank you so much. So another piece, you've described the shift from being the one in charge to being someone who multiplies other people's capacity. That's not a natural move for a strong leader. It requires giving up something, right? What did you have to let go of to make that shift?
So it's interesting. I think the natural progression of leadership, especially in the tech field where I'm from, is you start out as a individual contributor. If you've demonstrated some skill, eventually they ask you to lead a small team. And typically you're asked to lead that team because you're the smartest person in the room about that thing. You're smarter, and your team members really look to you for guidance and technical support. They want you to review their work and help them do it better, catch their errors, that sort of thing. Eventually, as you progress in leadership, you start to manage things that you don't actually know how to do well. And you manage people outside of your expertise, and you have to learn to rely on it. And it brings into play a different set of skills. First of all, you've got to understand organizational dynamics and relationship dynamics. A lot of your time in those roles involves, resolving conflicts or heading off conflicts through, organizational design. A lot of the time there becomes listening to what others are doing and picking up keys as to whether it was done well, whether, especially if the people doing the work felt like they weren't able to give their best efforts. In the technical world, engineers always want to spend more time. They always want to continue polishing the design, making it better. Give me another week. I can make this a little stronger, a little faster. And yet, as a manager, you're bound by schedules and budgets. And so finding that compromise and understanding where we are and heading that off by giving resources to the people doing the work and kind of moving to that servant leadership role. But I think the big shift for you as a leader, when you move into that role, what you take satisfaction from in your job fundamentally changes. At early leadership roles where you're being rewarded for your technical expertise, there's a satisfaction knowing I got the right answer to something. As a student, we, get our exams back and we see that we got a high score and we feel satisfaction in that we did well and we came up with the right answers. As a middle manager, you don't have that sense of right answers. You now don't take direct pride in the work that you do so much as you take pride in the work that your team is doing. And so you have to learn to shift what you appreciate about yourself, right? And sometimes you can't make your project successful. You can only maximize the chances of success. So you might even fail, your project might even fail, but you failed in the least bad way possible. So that idea of taking pride in what your team does, to me, I'm a father also, and so it's like taking pride in your children. Children win an award at school or accomplishment on the sports field, and you can take pride in them because you established an environment that allowed them to reach their full potential. It's the same thing for those middle manager roles. You have to take pride that you established an environment that allowed your team members and the team collectively to reach its full potential. That's a little bit of shift in thinking and how you walk away at the end of the day of the week and feel satisfied that you did a good job.
Yeah, that's a big internal move right there. What helped you to get there? You remember that moment, and just share a story when that internal shift happened and what made that possible.
That's great. I can remember a very specific instance. I was working in a large engineering aerospace firm, and I got promoted to a department head. It's over a group of about 30 people, including about a half a dozen managers of about 5 or 6 people each. And I remember one of my managers came to me and he was very distraught. His name was Justin. And Justin had been a candidate for my position. And I had gotten it, he had not. And he was absolutely convinced he was the smartest person in the department at the technical work that the department did. And so he was very disgruntled about why I said, and especially because I came from an adjacent area and didn't have all the expertise. I was managing people that were much smarter than I was in the technology. And he didn't understand why he had not been promoted, and he was very upset. And I was able to talk to him, number one, about the role, what was involved in it, and what you took pleasure from, and what you got to do and what you didn't get to do. And number two, to help him align that with his own individual career goals and say, as I've gotten to know you, I see that you really enjoy this kind of work. You don't really enjoy the sort of work I do. So maybe this is a blessing that you didn't get this role, and because what's needed in this role is this set of skills. And I took somebody who, came into this as an adversary with me, and by talking to him, getting to know him, understanding him, helping him see the situation, he eventually realized this was not a role he would have enjoyed and not one he would have been. And we helped him transition into another role where he was actually much, much happier. And he ended up with a very, very happy career. That was a big confidence for me to build her to, because I think it's often very difficult to deal with these kind of people who were turned down when you were promoted, but be able to get him. And he became one of my strongest advocates.
What had you choose to do that?
I had a lot of admiration for him. He had a lot of capabilities, very well respected by his staff. He was very good at what he did. And I didn't want to see him flame out. I also knew I couldn't really develop the culture I wanted in my organization if I had someone who was all, second guessing my decisions, undermining them, etc. But I really wanted him to realize his full potential. And I realized he was a, square peg looking for a round hole. And so to help him really become the leader that he needed to be, it involved a different step that he couldn't see.
Yeah.
And so I think that's my whole career. If nothing else, I want people to achieve whatever self-actualization is going to give them the most satisfaction. If that's, some sort of different work-life balance, I've tried to accommodate that with people, put them into different situations, right? Maybe they need to do other things at that point in life, but kind of helping people realize what they do want to be, and then helping them achieve that, I think is one of the greatest joys of leadership you can have.
Right. When did that switch for you from being the expert in the room to really wanting to support others fulfilling their potential? When did that shift for you?
I think for me, it became about what my influence could be, right? I was looking at my career, and you can, as an individual technical contributor, you can feel happy for, getting the right answers, and that's fine. But occasionally on projects, I got a chance to really contribute to something. I remember a technical project where I kind of intervened. I was a very junior person. I probably shouldn't have done this, but I kind of stepped forward and said, hey, this is a huge problem. It happened to be a spacecraft design, and I could see a flaw that nobody else could see. And here I am, one of the youngest people in the room, just a couple of years out of college. And I was bold enough to step forward and say, this is a problem. Give me some time. Let me show you. And fought against some very senior people who didn't see it the same way I did. Then eventually convinced them. And then we had a chance to actually see the problem that I had identified manifest itself. And I realized, had I not been there, had I not stood up, had I not gotten my ideas out to the decision makers, we would have lost, in this case, a multi-million-dollar spacecraft. Would have just been completely lost to us. That's one of those, earn all of your career salary in a week kind of moments. And that gave me a lot of confidence. And then that said, it's not about being smart. It's about influence. What is your influence over the success of your organization or your team or the success of individuals? That gave me a hunger for being in positions where I could exert more influence. And that set me on a path to finding places where I could influence broader and broader groups. It set me on a chart to get to corporate management because corporate managers get to make very, very broad strategy decisions that affect the entire success of the corporation, right? Eventually, I got into my current job, which is ideal because now I'm designing and delivering training curriculum through a very large team of about 80 people that actually influence the next generations of technical contributors and leaders across the organization. So I've kind of reached my zenith now, from my perspective of I'm not just influencing the group I'm at, I'm influencing the next generation. Mm-hmm. And so that to me, it ends up being about influence. If you feel confident that you can make things happen, you want to make those things happen for the largest number of people possible.
So when you think about the next generation and an impact there, What is it that you most want to pass on?
A couple things. Number one, to make sure people develop a perception of being a lifelong learner, right? Our society is changing very quickly. Our environments are changing very quickly. The advent of artificial intelligence, which is one of the areas I specialize in, has put a huge amplification on that. I mean, we are moving dramatically into things like autonomous taxis and, Siri and Alexa and other, assistants and robotics. Our lives are going to be radically different in the next 10 to 20 years than they are now, right? And I think for us to be successful, we're going to need to embrace that change. And people have to recognize that the skills that got me where I am now are not the skills that are going to get me forward. And so I want them to sort of realize that lifelong learner. And then I'd also like people to develop a curiosity, to not be afraid of that kind of change, but to say, I have some confidence. I can navigate this. I'm seeing that right now. There's a lot of AI fear out there. This is new technology. And I think when I've led a number of organizations through technology adoption issues like AI, and there's always some segment of the population that says, hey, I don't think I'm going to be good at this. There's a problem with new technology because if you don't feel like you're going to be good in it, you have a tendency to want to kill it or to at least downplay it. It's that loss of perceived personal power, right? I'm really good at what I'm doing. I've gotten to where I am in the organization based on my expertise or my skill. And now you're going to change the rules on me. And in this new environment, I might not be perceived as valuable as I am now. And if I'm not sure I can adopt to this new technology, I'm going to need to say, well, that technology probably won't work here because it's not going to drive us. So I want people to be able to embrace that technology and say, yes, I can change. I can get through this. I can adopt these new skills. I can keep up with the progressions of the times because the technology is going to advance whether we adopt it or not. And I want to see everybody, live up to their potential. So lifelong learner and helping to manage the changes that are associated with that.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about being a lifelong learner and going back a little bit, right, where kind of the beginning, the early part of the career is having the answer. This is where my value comes, and getting it right, or my level of expertise, or I saw that this was coming, any of those things, right? And shifting that where we are the learner. And I'm thinking about how what is it? Can you remember the time when? And I don't know if it was a moment or a progression. So maybe you can speak to that. When you valued learning over having the answer.
Yeah. In engineering, we talk about living in an uncertain world and having resiliency. Resiliency is the ability of a system to adapt to a changing environment. And so there's been several times where I've designed systems as a younger engineer where the environment was uncertain. Interesting enough, my PhD was actually dealing with uncertain environments and how to design things like spacecraft that can deal with that kind of uncertainty. So I think that the learning of that started early. And I think a couple of times in my life, I've been asked to lead initiatives which were new technology to my organization. And in those, I needed to become smart. I needed to bring a bunch of other people with me in that journey and become smart. I worked at one aerospace firm and was asked to lead an initiative on a field called Lean Six Sigma. And Lean Six Sigma is about process improvement and about making your processes better, cheaper, faster. And we had a new executive leader, CEO, come in who was very, very positive. They had worked under Jack Welch at General Electric, and they were firm believers in this methodology. And the entire organization was skeptical about it. They just didn't believe it. And part of it was that perceived loss of personal power. Right? If this is good and I'm not good at it, then I won't be valued, and so therefore this must not be good. Because I just don't want to accept the reality where my skills are not going to be valued anymore. And so I really cut my teeth on learning how to implement this and how to make people feel safe with that new technology and how to bring them along. And I had to be a learner myself because I didn't know much about the field or the methodology or how to learn. And yet I was supposed to, in 2 weeks, start standing up in front of people and training them on how to do it. And so I appreciated, and I saw the benefits of the organization with this methodology. I saw the growth in the culture. I saw the profitability that we got from that. So that happened. There were similar other process initiatives. I spent, a good 15 years of my life just running various technology improvements and other methodology improvements for organization. And so over and over again, I learned it was something I could learn. And it was something I could help others learn, and the organization would profit.
So you found, instead of your power as the expert, you found your power as the learner.
Yes. And power as the learner, and eventually as the teacher of learners. Understanding how adults learn, I think, is really critical to that.
Yeah.
And that kind of self-awareness in yourself. We all learn different. A lot of people learn by doing, a lot of people learn by hearing, a lot of people by seeing. We have all the different learning modalities. And then eventually taking that knowledge and that experience and turning it into curriculum design. How do we teach a new subject? How would I raise AI fluency in an organization? What do people need to know about a large language model? And recognizing how people learn and how people adapt. You've got to create an environment that's safe for experimentation, first of all. You have to create paths for them to say, I don't know how to do this, and to get help, right? And all of that, I think, is not necessarily natural, and there's a lot of books on it, but it's not something you study typically in school. And so I just learned a lot of that by trial and fire. I made a lot of mistakes, but I learned it's not about the CEO saying, okay, next week we're all going to be AI fluent. It's about helping people on that journey, dealing with their personal fears. A lot of it's about recognizing that people are afraid, recognizing that. And people will have two different responses. It's kind of fight or flight, right? They'll either, if somebody doesn't feel safe in an environment, they're either going to fight, right? They're going to resist the change that you're trying to make, or they're going to flight. They're going to quit engaging. They're going to disengage. There'll be this, on paper compliance with it. Yes, I went to the training class, but they didn't learn, they didn't adapt, and they didn't change their behavior. So recognizing how to spot fight or flight and address that in a classroom, in a technology adoption program, that was something I just got a lot of. I was lucky enough, and it was fascinating. Again, that idea of influence. If I can change the culture of an organization, if I can change the performance level of organization, that to me is very, very satisfying.
So I'd love to hear a story about a moment when you were able to do exactly that, right? So you're talking about fear, recognizing when somebody's in fight or flight, and then what do you do to respond to that and shift so that there's what's needed to be able to learn? Because I can't learn when I'm in fight or flight.
Right. Gosh, so many fun organizations. Let me pick one from the Lean Six Sigma. The CEO said, okay, everybody is going to go off and take a 2-week training course on this new methodology. Very, very poorly received by the staff, who already felt overworked and behind in their schedules, right? And now I'm going to carve 2 weeks of my life off for something I don't believe we should even be doing, right? And so I got begrudging compliance from somebody, and I sat in a lot of classes to kind of understand what was going on. And I can remember one gentleman in the class, and he was a retired Air Force colonel. Somebody had been very successful in his career with the skill set he had, and now he was being forced to take training in something, and he was completely a non-believer. And I remember sitting in the classroom watching a trainer I had brought on to train him, and he just sat in the back with his arms folded. And it was like, I'm not going to learn and you can't make me. And I could tell he wasn't connecting his individual goals with the corporate goals that we had. And so it was originally that kind of flight, total silence, total disengagement with the class, not participating in class exercises, that sort of thing. And eventually it became fight, where he started to argue with the instructor about something being presented and pointing out how useless this was, and the whole thing was useless. And so, one of the breaks, I pulled him aside and I said, instead of saying, your behavior is disruptive and you need to stop, right? I said, it sounds like you have some concerns and I need to understand those better. Can we sit and talk about, senior management thinks this is important, but you're coming at it from a different perspective. I want to understand your perspective. I want to see it. And I was open to the idea that maybe this wasn't a good idea, at least from his perspective. And we sat and he talked about it. And, I understood better where he was coming from, and I was able to address a lot of the concerns that he had. And the change, Kristina, was overnight. I mean, literally, the next day we went back to class, he became the strongest advocate. All of a sudden, he's leading exercises, he's modeling the proper behaviors, etc. He's thinking of ways we can extend it and such. But we had to create what they sometimes refer to as a pool of shared meaning. We had to both contribute what we understood about the problem and say, is there a collective position here where you could be right and I could be right? We could both be right. Yes, maybe that was a bad idea, but there are places where that idea could also work, and now it's a question of adjusting it. So I think it was honoring his background, his success, what he knew about it, but also showing him that there were other things that he wasn't aware of where this could help. And I've had dozens of those kind of events over my life, and those are all very rewarding.
Thank you. So moving toward it from the perspective of building relationship and creating shared meaning, shared purpose. Yeah. So if your wisdom could land somewhere specific, reach the person who needs it most, who is that person? And what do you most want for them to walk away with?
Great question. I think you get to my career, 45 years of experience, get to this point, and I feel I have benefited so much from the mentors and the teachers and colleagues that I've had in my life. And so my goal is really to give back to the next generation to help them benefit that. And I think the target person I'd like to speak is somebody who thinks they might want to be a leader, but they're not sure, or maybe they're a little apprehensive. In the technical world, sometimes, a person who may be well suited for leadership might be reluctant to go there because they either feel like, this is going to take me out of the technical work that I'm enjoying now, right? Or, maybe my colleagues are going to look down on me. Well, gee, I guess you can't cut the technical work anymore, so you went into management, et cetera. Or, that perception that maybe as a manager, all I'm going to do is deal with conflict all day, right? And especially those kind of engineering future leaders, technical future leaders, they see leadership as a bunch of soft skills. And they think, well, the way you become a leader is you pick a role model and you just act like them. So maybe I'll be a leader like General Patton or my favorite political figure or something, right? And they look at their skill sets and say, I don't have those skills. I'm not charismatic. I'm not insightful in terms of leadership. Those are the people I want to encourage to look hard at leadership and understand what's involved. Not everybody's cut out to be a leader, but a lot of them are, and recognize there are frameworks, there are micro learnings and tools and techniques out there that you can apply to leadership. That the world of organizational dynamics and team dynamics is a bunch of voodoo, right? There are principles about what motivates people to work, and they're fairly straightforward, and you can learn those. And so I want to reach that group and say, get into a class on leadership or management, learn the principles, learn some frameworks and foundations that are going to help you, and then evaluate whether this might really be a place where your influence could be magnified. I wouldn't want anybody to turn down a leadership position because they don't really understand what it's all about, or they don't feel like they could learn the skills necessary to be a good leader, because I think almost everybody can. There'll be people that maybe wouldn't enjoy that leadership position, or maybe, let's say, would enjoy being a technical contributor more. But the world needs leaders, and sometimes not all the right people who the world needs in leadership positions get there. So that's the group I'm trying to speak to, is those people that say leadership is a skill set that can be learned, and it can be something you can be better at, and you don't have to be perfect. It's not like a math problem where there's a right and a wrong answer. Sometimes you try some tools and you make the situation better, and sometimes it becomes worse, but everything becomes a learning opportunity. That lifelong learner applies to leadership models too. Somebody like myself can do it and make some mistakes along the way, but grow and learn and get better at it. You can too.
Yeah, and the key thing that I heard you say is recognizing when tension rises, right? When the conflict is there, and moving towards it from a place of building relationship and from a place of appreciation. Like, that's what I heard over and over again. And it flips it right around, right? The one who's in the back of who's in fight or flight, right? Whether it was the story that you talked about in the classroom, or the story that you talked about when you were offered a position of leadership, you moved towards the conflict from a place of appreciation and relationship building, right?
Yeah, I think people are uncomfortable with conflict, and conflict's neither good or bad. In fact, we often say in engineering, if there isn't a conflict, we don't know that we have a good answer, right? If I make a suggestion on a spacecraft design and nobody criticizes that, we don't get any better. And so we do activities called peer reviews, where we actually look at each other's designs, and we encourage people in a polite, respectful, constructive manner to critique our designs. And I've been at reviews before where I said, look, I'm not getting enough critiques. You guys need to critique this more. There's got to be problems here, come after me. Give me some stuff. I want the best possible design. I don't want you just to all say, oh, that looks fine, right? And so that same sense, recognizing that I can collaborate effectively, that there's wisdom and strength in different perspectives, and we might all be right. And if we can look for the solutions where we're all right, and that's going to involve some differences of opinion, but that's good, healthy conflict. That leads to better solutions. That leads to stronger organizations. That leads to more engaging cultures. And so I harness the conflict. I structure it to be good and to help lead me on a path that makes my team, organization, and the lives of all the people involved on it better.
Fantastic. That's what this show is all about. Grounded engagement, liberating leadership. I'm so excited. Thank you for being here. And you've articulated something a lot of leaders feel but rarely say out loud, that the real work isn't about the change you drive. It's about the capacity you leave behind. I have one last question, and that is, what's a question I haven't asked yet that you would like to be asked?
Oh, that's a great idea. Gosh, we've explored so many fun things. Um, I think maybe one thing to mention is, where are the, have I always been successful, right? And we've had a chance to talk about a lot of success stories here. Have I had failures? And the answer is yeah, of course. And have I made some colossal big mistakes? Yes. And um, how do you perceive that? In the end, you think of it all as a big science experiment, right? And some things worked and some things failed, right? All the classic stories about, how many times Edison failed before he invented the light bulb. Did that discourage him? He said, well, no, something like 99 failed experiments, right? And don't you get discouraged? He says, no, I've found 99 things that don't work, right? And so I think failure is just built into the system. If you're not failing, you're not taking enough risks, right? And there'll be such situations where it's just impossible to know the right direction. So I've had some failures like that, but I think the big key is I've learned from that. I've remained confident that the failures have made me stronger and given me, a list of things to look out for in similar initiatives. And so people shouldn't be afraid to fail.
Can you give me an example of one story that revealed that to you?
Yeah, I think early in my career, I got a chance to manage a team, and I was managing a young female engineer, and she came into my office and shut the door behind her and started crying. And she said, it's okay that you fire me. I don't mind, but can I get at least 2 weeks notice? And it hit me out of the blue because she was a good performer. She wasn't in any trouble. We had never mentioned any trouble. And I said, there's nothing to fire you about, you're doing fine. And she's, well, no, I'm not doing fine, but I just want 2 weeks notice. Can I get 2 weeks notice? And so I started to figure out what was the problem. And it turned out to be work style, right? It was a young engineer, different people, that appreciate different things in work. And what I appreciated was autonomy, like a lot of engineers, tell me what to do, leave me alone, let me do it, right? And don't micromanage me, right? For her motivation as a young engineer was she liked to know and get feedback on how she was doing. But because she was doing well, I rewarded her by not talking to her, right? And it turns out this was exactly wrong from her. And it was a failure of me on a couple of things. The biggest thing was just not knowing what motivated her, not having enough discussion to realize she wasn't motivated by the same successes I was, the same rewards I was. She needed to feel like I was looking at her work and I was judging it and she was getting feedback about it. And so I needed to change my leadership style with her to give her what she needed to really feel empowered in the workplace. And as I got to know her, I realized it didn't have to be, oh, you're always doing good. If she did wrong, in fact, she expected once wrong me to say, hey, that report could have been better. That work wasn't really up to our standards, right? And she expected realistically that she wouldn't always do well, but as long as I gave her feedback, she felt more comfortable. That was a failure, but it occurred early on as a young manager. And I incorporated that. And that was a life lesson that sunk in for me so strongly that I changed the way. I started really getting to know my people and what motivated them. And did they want feedback? Did they want to be left alone? What really would help them do their best work? And so that's that. I think that failure probably helped me more in the early parts of my leadership career than anything else. So that's one example.
Great. Thank you. Great example. So exactly what today's show showed us is that the wisdom underneath all of it is still finding new pathways to reach people. Thank you for sharing and your offering to Grounded Engagement, Liberating Leadership. Until next time.
Thanks for the time.